and welcome to this week's Hocus Focus, where we are keeping your Sundays safe for high strangeness. I'm Sara Mondaini.
And I'm Thomas Sheridan.
And welcome to episode 12. And I hope you've all had a lovely equinox and spring is in the air, and it won't be long until the clocks go forward and we get those long summer nights. So how's your weekend been, Thomas?
It's okay. It's a bit dull and grey, but I can actually see spring is here. There's a lot of new growth has appeared. The frog spawn is out, and I can already smell the wild garlic. So yeah, I can't deny that it does seem like with this endless bloody winter we've had since November is finally coming to an end.
Yeah, it seems like it's rained every day for I don't know how long.
And also it's been long. Remember, Christmas was unbelievably long, and January was endless. Well, the first story this week is something I've been very interested in and continually interested in for many years, and that's the concept of reincarnation. Now, this is obviously a very central spiritual belief among many spiritual traditions, not just the Hindu. In fact, it's probably the default position for the afterlife outside the Abrahamic religions. It's probably the default position in terms of what happens to you when you die. Now, there is, as Rudolf Steiner had pointed out in a very brilliant essay he once wrote on the thing, it is a difficult topic to rationalize because if you come back in the future, is that really useful to you? Wouldn't it be better to come back in the same life and live it over again and correct your mistakes? And this whole thing of does it prevent spiritual ascendancy into the greater cosmos, like you were talking about last week, Sarah? Yes, these are all very profound questions, and there's ways of framing it. You can frame it within the Vedic Hindu concept that it's intrinsically related to, like, the kind of moksham patam concept of reincarnation, that you will come back either benefiting or being punished for your previous things in your last life. That seems to me very kind of Abrahamic in how it's presented. But when you start looking into the whole concept of moksham patam, you see it's much more complicated and subtle than that. It's more of a learning process than a punishment process. There's also the concept of, like, coming back in the future. What are you really learning and gaining if we can't remember our previous past lives? And these are all valid points. But there was, there's things, without sounding neurotic, I've read lots of books on life after death, and I have some of them here, like this one from the 80s, Reunions, was all a big rage about meeting their loved ones after death. Colin Wilson's Afterlife, which I totally would recommend. It deals with in fact, it publishes it has a critique of that whole essay by Steiner. You have After Death, a Future for Human Consciousness by Darrell Rainey, which is more like a kind of like we're seeing death as a next journey, as a next life. And then there's this fascinating one called Many Masters, Many Lives by Brian L. Weiss, MD, who was a psychiatrist who started interviewing people and discovering that, against his atheistic previous beliefs, that people do live lives over and over again. Now, regardless of the problems with reincarnation, right, the evidence is surprisingly remarkable. In fact, there's better evidence for reincarnation than there is for the concept that you go to heaven or somewhere like that. And there's one particular group of people called the Druze, Druze, and they live in the Middle East. Most of them are in Israel. And they used to be Muslims about 1,000 years ago, and then they converted to a new version of a kind of an Abrahamic light religion. And like the Cathars, they believe very much in active and proactive reincarnation, in the sense that not only do you come back, but you can actually go and look for your relatives that are now gone in their new bodies, or you can go find your own family if you've been reborn as a child. And they've had remarkable results. Channel 4, about 20 years ago in England, 25 years ago in England, did a fantastic documentary on them. And they showed, like, how the kids in the Druze culture will, the way in the Western culture, when a kid will start saying to their parent, "Mammy, when I was a man, I used to live there. Mammy, when I was a woman, I used to work in that factory, and the parents often get very frightened when they hear this, especially if they're like from a kind of an Abrahamic mindset, the religious, and they often tell the kid, "No, that's just imagination. Don't be saying that. Don't be saying that. Don't say that. It's not good." Well, in the Druids, they tell them to they encourage them to do it, and they very often find their own families that they came from, and not only do they find their own families, but the families that they meet don't reject them. They're delighted that their dead brother or their dead uncle is now back in this little boy, or dead grandmother is now back in this little girl, and it's just remarkable stuff. Now, there's also numerous stories of people who had strange illnesses, like a pain in the side that was seemingly had no cause for it. And when they were little kids, they says, "Mommy, my side hurts because when I was in the war, that's where I was shot." These kinds of things are these stories are incredibly common. Or when a parent is driving around with the kid in the back, and oh, look, it's my old house. I used to live there. I used to live in that house. That was my bedroom up in the top corner. And this kind of thing. And again, the evidence is often quite remarkable. There was a very famous case here in Ireland of an English woman who started having these visions of a place, and she didn't know where it was in the world, except she had a feeling it was in Ireland. And she actually discovered eventually, drawing these pictures of the buildings and so on, that she was a woman who lived in about 100 years ago in a town north of Dublin called Malahide. She went over there and found all her children, who were all elderly by then. And she was much younger. She was in her 30s, and they were all like in their 60s, 70s, 80s. And they were on camera saying, "Our mother is back, and here she is." And these were Catholics. So, if the evidence is strong enough, you have to go with it, no matter how implausible or offensive or sensitive it is surrounding your own religious convictions. But when you look deeper into it and you talk about the Abrahamic thing, there is an effect within Orthodox Judaism called Gilga, which it basically means that if you're not happy about how your life went, you can come back in this life again. And towards the end of your life, you actively start deeply recalling and remembering your earliest memories of childhood, the sensations. You bring them into yourself, and you consciously say to yourself, "I'm going to come back and live this life again." In fact, that's what I've been doing. That's what I plan to do personally. And so, as I'm in the second half of my life now, I'm putting in a very strong effort into this achievement I want to do and live this life again. This is why people have to be careful of things like quantum suicide. All these atheists walking around saying there's nothing after death. Well, you'll get nothing. You get what you want. There's a lot of evidence to support this idea as well. But the most attainable seems to be reincarnation. Now, there's reincarnation that's like you just come back in the same life in the future. I'm sorry, in the future, in the same life over and over again. And there's also the theories that you could live so many lives until you've actually fulfilled your dharma, your spiritual dharma, and you've achieved oneness, and then you ascend into the God state, into the godly world. And that's just a very common thing like Taoism and the various strands of Eastern Buddhism and so on. But there's tremendous evidence for reincarnation, tremendous evidence. And it's the only afterlife thing, other than, say, Bardo, where someone has died and their soul hasn't moved on, and they can be contacted or seen even, that you can actually say, well, there's proof of life after death. We come back. And that's reincarnation. And that's why I believe in it. And I think that's why, you can have a fatalistic attitude towards it, like the Cathars somehow did. That they were doing that sort of Neoplatonist idea, which is also the Gnostics, that this planet was an actual hellhole. This was hell, and your concept was a spiritually developed through your numerous lives in order to escape it. I don't agree with that at all. As a pagan, the very idea of this planet being hell is just ridiculous. It's not. It's a stunningly beautiful place. It's on every level. A lot of this neuroses about this being hell comes directly from like the barren lands in the Middle East where these ideas came from. the land of sand and lizards and so on. But in Europe, or even in India, where you had, tremendous color and abundance and tremendous natural diversity, that there was a greater appreciation for this planet itself. So that's reincarnation. I'm a believer. I'm actively involved in getting myself together on that thing. I subscribe to the Hindu concept of Moksha, that that there are laws of karmic consequences, but they're not as brutal as you're meant to believe they are. And they do have the ability to, it's actually the game of snakes and ladders for children that was invented in India to teach kids how to achieve a karmic state, so they would get to the final square. And actually, their original version of the game has 111 squares. So you get to 111, and then you've achieved godhood again, or you've learned the lessons for your next life. So there you go. What are your feelings yourself on reincarnation, Sarah?
I believe there's lots of different levels of reincarnation. And I think over eons and millennia, over time and space, we've come back as stones, rocks, trees, shrubs, animals. I think we come back through these levels, farm animals, onto pets, up to human beings. And I think a lot of souls get stuck at the human level due to the mistakes that we make, and we kind of get stuck on the treadmill at this level. It's quite difficult to get off and go on to the next level.
Well, that's a very druidic idea. There is some interesting documentation that I came across a few years ago within the Irish pagan pantheon of a thing called the Somleth. And the Somleth was like basically the basic soul, the basic essence of the personality. And in one life it could be a salmon, and the next life it could be a horse, and the next life it could be a man or a woman. And you basically, in order to understand the totality and the beauty of the natural world, the natural law cycle of things, you have to live all these lives as different entities and understand their struggles. So it's kind of like almost like Native American things, lots of things like this as well. And that's what that is. It's like there's what you're talking about there is very much an Irish pagan thing of the Somleth, they call it Somleath, I think. And you can't get a lot of information on it, but that's the idea, that you can be anything. You can be like a tree.
And I think we've all experienced being a farm animal as well. So we've all been to the abattoir. We all know what that's like. And I think we have to go through that to understand it and to evolve and get through whatever journey our soul is on to get to whatever the end or the higher levels are, which we don't know, godhood, whatever that might be. I also believe that not only do we go through the levels, but I think when we get to the human level, we get to choose who plays what part in our lives in order to help us learn and also maybe pay back karma. So for example, if you was a murderer in a previous life, then in another life after that, you might have to experience that hurt that action caused, maybe by being murdered yourself or by losing a close loved one to a murderer. And I think we've all been murderers and rapists and whatnot in past lives, and we've all performed various acts of evil over the course of our time. Otherwise, how would we learn and instinctively know what's right and wrong? And how could a soul grow unless it experiences the light and the dark? So how could you be a good soul if you've not reincarnated from a lower level and done some nefarious things? You can't have light without the dark.
I remember my past life remarkably well, and it puts to bed all this nonsense, a stereotype that these dingbat New Agers talk about. In my previous life, I was a princess in the court of Cleopatra, or I was Nefertiti. In my previous life, I was a dock worker in the East End of London. I lived in mundane poverty and hardship. I just didn't have much experience of life, and I died in the 1950s sometime. I basically had just lived in that part of London, in amongst the hardness and the poverty and the constant hard work around the docks. I worked on the docks unloading ships and cranes and stuff and putting in warehouses. Not a machine operator, I mean a physical, like carrying stuff in wheelbarrows and stuff like that. And I can remember the smell of the coal in the tugboats. I can smell the gas, everything. I can the constant damp and the smog and pollution. And then I died. And I think and I died. I was like one of the people in that song, the Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. You know, that song really talked about people who don't really live. They just exist. And I think I was one of them. And it all had to do with my economic status. I literally had no ability to do the things I wanted to do. It was merely survival. And I think that's why in this life I have like lived, you know, I've done everything and I'm not stopped. I just have made use of every single opportunity and everything that's come my way, and I never stopped. I never stopped doing that, and I think that was a result of the previous life of being basically bound to the harshness of it. The first time I went to London, I didn't even need to look at the tube map. I knew my way around instinctually. I always feel very at home there, and I've never lived there, but I've visited quite a lot. And that area of London is all gone now. It's all been like redeveloped as Canary Wharf and all that stuff, all on, you know, financial district. But yeah, that's where I was. So anyone ever says to you like, oh, it's not real, because when they always say that they were Queen Nefertiti's, you know, mistress or courtesan or something. No, that's what I remember. And if you look at the most plausible ones, they're usually things like that. They're people who have, if they do remember strongly trauma-wise, they died somehow. Usually wars. It's very common one for children to remember battles in their next life. But I think you see, this is the kind of karma thing, right? It's not that this life is being punished for the last life. I'm remembering the last life in order to make sure I kick ass in this one. You know, the kind of thing I've never wasted a second from the moment I left school. You know, the kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I wanted to do, I've done, and I'm not finished yet. And so I think that came from that. And I think that's the kind of lesson that was brought over. The lesson of like, you know, live your bloody life. You know.
I think also if you're one of these people who's having a quiet and uneventful life for a current incarnation, not necessarily existing, but just getting on with your own business and nothing, you know, nothing much going on, just day-to-day stuff.
I know what you're going to say. They had a rough, chaotic life the previous.
Yeah, it could be
Yep,
because they're recuperating from an
yep.
intense previous life. And I mean, as corny as it sounds, for example, someone like Michael Jackson, yeah, lived a life like he lived. So it's very possible that when he reincarnates, he may come back to a life of peace and quiet with a small circle and a fairly uneventful life. So his spirit can recover from that horrendous journey that he was on.
That's the real meaning of the karmic rebirth. It's a correctional process rather than a judgmental or punishing one. And you know, I think it's one of the things that determines you from an NPC is that an NPC just exists or whatever. But a person who makes like a quiet life, someone who is like these people are like Martha Stewart types. I just want a quiet home and a nice home and to be able to cook. And I think, well, that woman in her previous life probably was in a concentration camp or something, and now she just wants the pleasures of home.
Yeah.
Or she, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, I'm totally believe that's the same thing. So just like I had a shit life last time, I tried to make up for it this time. You know, a person who's having a nice easy time of it now and wants that probably had chaos in the last one.
My previous life, I recall I was killed in the Second World War by a bomb landing on my house, and I had 2 children, and it was actually in Liverpool, and I think I was only a young mother, and I think that's one of the reasons why in this life I've not had children, because I didn't get to do anything in that life because I had the children and I died young in a Luftwaffe attempt
Right,
at
yeah.
bomb dropping. So in this life, I don't have children, and I'm able to fulfill a lot of things that I didn't get a chance to do in that previous life. And I haven't got children this time to consider. I can just get on and do that. And I will admit it took a long time to make peace with the whole children thing, but now I understand it better from a past life point of view. It kind of helped me
Well,
make peace.
there's more social pressures on women that way than men. Much more. Like when people have ever asked me why do you have kids, I said I was a selfish bastard. I want to have fun. And
Yeah,
also, I'm older than my brothers and sisters, and I took care of them when they were babies. I changed their nappies. You know, poured the milk on the back of my wrist to see if the baby could drink it, and all this kind of thing. So that was taken care of me as a child. So I didn't miss out on that. So there's like, and on top of that, I just wanted to have fun. I didn't want, it's of course nothing wrong with child rearing and all. It's a noble thing, but it just this is where I am, and I never was, but I noticed much more pressures on women that way, social pressures.
yeah. But looking at the world now, it's another blessing as well, because it's a very difficult time to bring a child into this world as well. So I'm kind of glad I don't have that responsibility.
Oh, I have tremendous sympathy for parents who are raising young kids now, but I also have enormous respect for them if they're doing it in order to like give the kids a life outside what the transhumanists have planned for the planet.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, it's the toughest time to be a parent, I think, right now. But by God, it's also the most honorable if you're actually, clued in.
I believe it's old souls and young souls as well. And I believe that today's woke and needle crafted are young souls, and the souls are not very evolved yet. And that's kind of like, I'm not talking NPCs so much. I'm talking people who are easily manipulated and people who go along to get along.
Well, I have a friend who says that the NPCs are recently reincarnated farm animals, and
Well, that goes back to what we said earlier.
yeah, and I think that's actually they're on their first stage of human after the last one in the slaughterhouse. So that's a very interesting concept as well. They're herd animals. They lived in herds, cows and sheep. So that's another one too, isn't it?
We
Like I
move up
also
through the levels, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Well, and so like, and I think that's a lot of humans today. That could be because so many animals have been killed in slaughterhouses in recent decades that there's going to be lots of them coming back as what we call the NPC.
Yeah.
It's a theory, but it's just one to mull over.
Yeah, and it would make sense eventually then, wouldn't they come back more evolved?
Yeah,
And there may be hope for humankind after all if they come back and learn lessons from this.
I'm not ready to go there yet.
No, I know. I know.
Having
Maybe
dealt
in the
with them,
next life. In the
I
next
think that
life.
maybe the next time, maybe they should go back to being chickens or something. And do you have anything more to add to that?
Yes, only I wanted to ask you, what do you think about soul groups? Because I think we're all part of various soul groups when we're down here, and we're all brought together through various circumstances and situations. But I'm not saying everyone you meet is a soulmate or anything new agey like that. I'm saying that when you've met tribe members from past lives, because there's a kind of familiarity about it that you can't
Yeah.
put your finger on. It's a
Well,
different.
well, Joe Rogan recently said that that's one of the best things to prove reincarnation is not only the soul family thing, but also say someone who's Jewish being obsessed with Irish dancing and Irish music, completely different culture. Where does that come from? And we all know people like that they're obsessed with a culture or a place that they've never been to and have no connection to genetically in any way. And that's also proof of reincarnation, isn't it, in a way? So, and at the soul group thing, yeah, totally down with it. And you often find there's lots of similarities there. Like I was not surprised when you said Liverpool, because I have strong connections there too as well. So it's funny, isn't it? It's funny that way.
Yeah, it is, and it's funny how we come together. People come together. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you're meant to come together in this life, you will. And I think the internet makes that a hell of a lot easier now.
Oh,
For
big time. And
souls.
that's also it's the energetic level we vibrate at.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Reincarnation, everybody. If you want to incarnate a comment about this on the messages below, or the comments below this video, please do so as Sarah takes a dive into the water. And she was a swimmer in a past life, and we shall continue this post-mortal discussion in other forms and other ways on Hocus Focus in the future. Okay, have you been here before? Do you want to come back? Or more importantly, do we want you back? Reincarnation.
Every time I like to record, it goes. Can you let yourself be seen on the screen again, please? Can you show yourself? Can you show yourself on the screen, please, again? There you go. Stay. Thank you. Oh, stay. Thank you very much. So, we're not here to harm you or hurt you in any way. We just want to know that if there is people here. Oh, two. Thank you very much. We felt that there was more than one person here. Because we're not here to cause any problems. We're just here to do a little investigation. Because we know how magical this land is. On top of the wall. Look. Look, the Hygiene. On top of the wall. Up there. They're standing on top of the wall. Unbelievable. Yeah, look. Standing on top of the wall, the both of them. It's the wall there, bud. Look at them.
There's two of them.
Yeah, I know.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And there's the wall. As you can see, look, there's nothing there, just the wall. What do you say? This was an old school building too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Could be kids, see, it could be children.
Could be children, yeah.
For this week's folk horror cinema, we reviewed an absolute classic gothic horror. It's the 1977 Dario Argento film Suspiria. And it begins on a stormy night with an American dancer from New York called Susie Banyan, played by Jessica Harper. And she arrives in Freiburg, Germany, to attend the most prestigious ballet school in the world. And when she arrives, she witnesses a student fleeing in terror. So the next morning, she's told by the headmistress that the student she saw on the previous night was murdered and the police are investigating the crime. And Susie becomes friends with another student called Sarah, played by Stefania Casina. And she realises then that the school is a coven of evil witches led by Helena Marcus, the Black Queen herself, known as Mother Suspiria. Now, this is a classic 1970s horror for so many reasons, and the story is part of a trilogy called The Three Mothers, which consists of the films Suspiria, Inferno, and Mother of Tears. And these three mothers live in various parts of the world, and between them, they control the world. You've got Mother Suspiria in Germany, Mother Tenenbaum in New York, and Mother Lacrimarum in Rome. Now, Argento said the lead character of Susie was based on Snow White, and it is a fairy tale horror, and the plot is quite a simple one, but the visual effects and the suspense are off the scale, and it's like watching horror theatre. And it's filmed in Technicolor, and the use of the vivid lighting and the primary colours set the scene, and they alert the viewer to danger and evil, and it's just poetic to watch. And then to give it another layer of horror on top of this creepy lighting is this progressive rock sound, this track by a group called Goblin, and it's played over and over till it reaches its crescendo at the exact right moments. And it's one of the creepiest scores of music you'll ever hear, and you'll have it in your head for days after. And the furniture and the decor was an over-the-top sort of Liberty Art Deco style, full of geometric shapes, and together with the intense saturated primary colours, the use of lighting and the camera angles, even the furniture and the rooms were made to look evil. And there's a scene at the beginning, and it's just basically a pink lady's bathroom with dove prints on the wallpaper, which if you saw it in a magazine, you'd probably think, oh, that's nice. But in the movie, it was menacing and very 70s and very creepy. And every single scene in the movie has this feeling. And the deaths in the movie are violent and bloody. And Argento didn't want to use guns and things like that, because for most viewers, they've never experienced what it feels like to be shot. So he always chose familiar objects such as glass or razors or dog attacks, because we all know what it feels like to be cut by a shard of glass or a razor, or to be bit by a dog. So he used those items because he wanted you, the viewer, to feel the pain as you watched. And originally with this movie, Argento wanted the students of the ballet school to be young girls of around 10 or 12 years old, because it was a fairy story, and he thought the children being pursued by the witch would be more fitting for the story. But because there's so much violence in the film, it wasn't possible to use the child actors. So they used young women instead. But to keep the overall impression of the actors being childlike, all the doors were oversized and the door handles were placed much higher up. So the actors had to reach up to open the doors, and they were told to act childish by pulling tongues at each other and arguing over silly things. And it's an absolutely beautiful film that's shot in such a way you feel like you're trapped in the nightmare with these girls. And it's just a masterpiece. I love the movie. Fantastic.
Yeah, the Argento's a very interesting director. Prior to Suspiria, he did most of the slasher films, and you can see how this film is the transition film between his earlier slasher career and later esoteric career, because the other two films in the Mother trilogies don't have the same level of violence in them. This one is almost like the end of his old filmmaking and the beginning of his new filmmaking. But did you know this is based on a true story? His wife on his honeymoon told him that she went to a college where they practice black magic. She called it black magic and witchcraft, and an exclusive university or college or something. And he quizzed her further on, and it turned out that she was actually a witch. And a lot of the stuff that is in the film has actually come from her, not the killings, obviously, but the concept, the whole concept. In fact, she basically accused him of stealing her idea for the film. But that was based on a real thing. That they went on their honeymoon to the Swiss, German, Italian border region. And there they encountered someone who told them about geomancy and sacred landscapes. This is what makes this thing so special. It's like there's actually real occult behind the story of the film, and not someone just making a film. And Basel in Switzerland is considered one of these hell gates, and it's an interesting city because it sits on border three countries, and another one there's a few of them. They Turin, not surprisingly, I haven't known that place well myself. That definitely is, but Budapest is another. And London is sometimes referred to as one, and so is San Francisco. In fact, the last time I was in Turin, I was actually thinking about Dario Argento and why he didn't include Turin in when he was talking about the mothers, and I suddenly found myself on via San Francisco, and that's the name of a street in central Turin. So it's like, oh, that was a nice synchronicity. So maybe those cities mentioned are not the real ones. The ones that he didn't mention are the real ones. But yeah, I mean, thing's a classic. It's unbelievable, and the soundtrack is just it shouldn't have worked. That soundtrack, it should not have. He should not have gotten away with that, but he did. It worked. Like everything else, the violence is pretty nasty, but it's not gratuitous, and it does have a sense of theater about a lot of it. And I find some of the most disturbing parts with a part like when they're all having to sleep in there's two parts I remember very strongly from when I first saw it. When they're eating dinner and all the maggots start raining down from the ceiling. And also when they're sleeping in the dance studio and they have a curtain wrapped around them. The actual menacing nature of the curtain. And it's just a curtain, it's just a curtain, but there's something, what's on the so that a curtain is the occult magic. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, I didn't like the remake. Bring it just for a second. I didn't really care much for the remake of it. It was not that it was rubbish. It just did nothing for me. The original is the original and the best. And yeah, great choice for a film. It's and I also encourage people to watch the other Mothers trilogies films. They're quite different, but they're well worth the watch.
I've got a little bit of trivia about this movie because I do like this movie a lot, so I'm a bit of a nerd where it comes to this, making up for last week with the A Field in England. But I've got a little bit of trivia. The film was filmed in Rome, so it was set in Freiburg in Germany, but it was filmed in Rome. And the lady who portrayed Mother Suspiria at the end was actually a 93-year-old homeless prostitute that Argento had found on the street of Rome while filming, and he gave her the bit part, and she was never credited because she buggered off before they could give her any money or anything. Yeah, she just did one, had it away. And another thing is, in every Dario Argento film, when you see a killer with a glove, because a lot of the killing scenes he's just a hand, isn't it, going into his stabbing or hands around the neck of somebody. Whenever you see that hand with the glove on, it's actually Argento's hand. He plays all the killing. Yeah,
I'll give you that one. Freiburg it's famous for like academic schools and theater schools and stuff like that, but it's also the center of alchemy in Germany. And it was also in, the Middle Ages and later, it was one of the richest cities in the world, and mainly because of mineral mining and things like gold and stuff like that. But yeah, that was it's full of Masonic stuff, Freiburg, and it's full of all that weird occulticness. But I've never ever found any reason why he chose that city. It was filmed in Rome, but he chose Freiburg of all cities. But I would love to know the reason why, but at the same time, I guess he's hiding stuff. It's true occult, isn't it? We did when we saw that film growing up, we didn't know that the idea came from his wife, who was a witch, the mother of Asia Argento, and it's only now we're finding these things out, or the years prior to this. But yeah, it's a hell of a ride, that film. It's seriously intense, but works. It's not too assaulting on the senses.
No, it's not. It's theatre. It's horror theatre. Yeah. It's like watching. It's like being at the theatre or trapped in somebody's nightmare, and you can't get out and you can't look away. It's a great masterpiece, and isn't
even the name of it? The name sticks in your head because in the English speaking world, you never heard that word before that.
Yeah, I think it means mother of sighs, like sighing or But yeah, and I think Freiburg's on the outskirts of the Black Forest, isn't it?
It's actually where you go when you go camping in the Black Forest. That's the excursion point to actually enter it. That's why there's so many hotels there for people who are exploring the Black Forest. Yep.
It's quite a spooky place, isn't it? That is quite
The Black Forest, no, the real spooky forest are the ones, there's two of them. There's one up by the Hertz Mountains in northern Germany, and the one that I've been to a few times, the Odenwald. in Hesse. So the Black Forest is probably most beautiful and famous, but the other two, the Herz Mountains and the Brocken, up by Mount Brocken, where that's the center of Germanic witchcraft, and the Odenwald, the center of Germanic paganism. They're the ones. But the Black Forest does have its lore, and a lot of the Grimm's Brothers fairy tales were actually rooted in that. But it doesn't have anything like the lore in terms of like supernaturalism that the other two forests have.
Good film, go see it. And if you've watched it with us over the week, please put your opinions and reviews in the comments, because we're really interested to see what you guys thought about it too.
And also, we now have a Your Story segment on the show. So if you want to do a 2 or 3 minute review of it, mentioning something that we didn't mention here on camera, we'd be glad to include in the next episode as a follow-up.
Yes. And not only that, Thomas, it's your turn to pick the movie for next week that we're all going to be watching to review.
The film that we're watching next week is, drumroll, Angel Heart, with Mickey Rourke.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And Robert De Niro, set in late 1940s Louisiana.
Angel Heart.
You haven't seen it. I take it you haven't seen it.
Nope, I haven't. But I like Mickey Rourke and I like Robert De Niro, so I'll be in my element there. What year was it made?
Late 80s, I think.
So they're still relatively young then.
Oh yeah, he's really handsome and everything in it, yeah. But it's like, it takes place among like voodoo and witchcraft in the bayous of New Orleans and the back streets of New Orleans and stuff. A lot of that kind of thing going.
The Londondale Valley is supposed to be one of the most haunted areas of Britain. But that doesn't bother me. I've lived by it for most of my life, and I go exploring around here a lot. Today, I am at 2 locations where there have been reported sightings of either cryptids or zooforms. Boneless is the nickname given to a mysterious zooform described as an enormous black slug-like creature that's said to be as big as a whale. It was first reported in September 1950 by a railwayman called John Davis. One night he was riding his motorbike back home through the valley. He said he felt the urge to stop but didn't know why. So he listened to his instinct and stopped for no reason. As he did, he saw what looked like a giant black slug crawling across the road and up into the moor. He said it made a scraping noise as it moved and looked like a whale. It had an eye with a black pupil that was rolling around non-stop. He tried to follow the trail of the animal, but it disappeared and he could see no trace of it. It soon came to light that others had seen it too. It was spotted again by another person in the same location, and again near a place called Ogden Clough in a small valley below the moorland. Could an enormous Lovecraftian-type slug entity be residing in our valley? There is also a local legend that says the Devil's Elbow was the meeting place for 2 lovers. Their father was against the union and swore that he would rather give his daughter to the devil himself than allow the lovers to meet again. On their next meeting, the devil appeared and chased the terrified couple across the moor. As the devil reached out to claim his prize, a mighty voice cried out, and the devil's bent arm turned to stone. He ripped it off and threw it on the moor, forming the bend in the road. Now I wander a little further across the valley to Ladybower Reservoir. This area is also full of fairy lore and ghostly tales, but none so strange as a possible cryptid sighting here in the spring of 1991. A family were out picnicking by the beauty spot. On their way back to the roadside, they saw a figure almost 2.5 meters tall and covered in thick, long brown hair. The family were frozen in fear, looking at the creature, and the creature looking back at them. A passing car scared the man-like figure off, and it disappeared into some nearby woodland. In 2006, it was sighted again by a group of friends who reported they had seen the figure in the trees. The figure was surrounded by small green lights. Could this be the king of the fairies? Could it be a local cryptid that resides peacefully in the valley? Sandwiched between Wyn Hill and the Hordern Stone Circle, Ladybower is a hive of supernatural activity that remains a mystery to this day. This is Sara Mondaini in the heart of the haunted Londondale Valley in the north of England, reporting for Hocus Focus. Our next subject tonight is one that I really enjoy. I enjoy doing it and I enjoy talking about it, and that is psychometry. We have an aura, as you all know, and it's a strong electromagnetic field, and we give off electric energy and we receive magnetic energy. So basically, we're analog and we leave our traces and imprints everywhere we go and on everything that we touch. And this means that inanimate objects are affected by the energy, and we can read or gain information from that energy through using our psychometry. Psychometry is a bit different than doing auric readings, because when you do an auric reading, you're reading just one individual energy, and that's the energy of the person. But if you're reading an object, then you can pick up lots of mixed energies from different people and areas that the object has been in. So not only are we given as a gift items which carry their own energy before we get them, but we continue to infuse that object with our energy, and we might pass it on to somebody else. And usually it's the more dominant personality that imprints itself the most on an object. So, for example, if you owned a second-hand watch, Thomas, and you want me to read it, and the previous owner has more of a dominant personality than you do, it's more likely I would pick up on the other person than on something about yourself. So it's a bit hit and miss sometimes. I might give you some information that doesn't really relate to you. It might relate to a previous owner. Also, imagine going room from room and being struck by the changes in the atmosphere. Different houses and offices feel different from each other. And that's because the rooms absorb the different energies of people who've been in that space. And people actually use psychometry without realizing that they're doing it. So if someone gives you something or makes you something, like a cup of coffee or something nice to eat, you can feel the love in it. And that's a powerful manifestation of their energy. So yeah, think about it. If a loved one makes you a meal or even a sandwich, it always tastes much better than if you made it yourself. And it's the same with a simple coffee. And you're just picking up on the manifestation of that person's love that's been infused into it. And do you not find yourself sometimes the most simple handmade thing feels so much more sincere and loving than a really expensive and thoughtless mass-produced gift? And you can pick up images as well, and feelings from objects. So like for me, if I go into a charity shop, sometimes I can get overwhelmed by the atmosphere, and it can seem like everything's buzzing and chattering if I don't shut myself down. And natural fabrics and things that are natural fabrics like cotton and wool, they tend to absorb more than synthetics. And things like coins and antiques that have been passed through many hands and seen many experiences, they have a lot of information recorded in them. And also I can pick up from trees as well, which is my favourite thing. And I've hugged trees, and sometimes you can be quite moved to tears by the feeling of strength and security from hugging a tree, especially if it's an oak tree. And when I do psychometry myself, I get flashes of images. Sometimes I just see colours or symbols, and other times it can be like a film projection, or I can just feel the emotion of a personality or a situation. Now, one fallacy of psychometry is that it's a form of mediumship. It isn't. The information's coming from reading the imprinted energy and not from discarnate spirits. And it can be developed by anybody with the right sensitivity of mind. And it's a really great tool to have in your box, especially if you're looking to buy a new house, because you can pick up on whether the home's been a happy home and whether you're going to be compatible with it. And another thing psychometry helped me with, and it's something we talked about last week with regards to the Himalayan salt, is dispelling the belief that crystals from the New Age shops have healing properties, because a crystal has a memory of its geological surroundings before it was mined and polished and shaped. And that's called its inherent memory. And it also holds memories of the years it's been in contact with human beings, which is known as the accumulated memory. So mined crystals hold a lot of shock trauma from when they were blasted out of the earth, and they've passed through so many different hands before they get into yours when you decide to buy it. So people who might pick up a polished crystal and they're getting all this healing energy coming off it, I don't feel it. I just don't feel it. It's like might as well be holding a piece of glass. All you're going to pick up from it really is shock and trauma. If you go and put that to somebody in the crystal shop, what we've just said, they'll just tell you to run a smudge stick over it or run it under cold water. Not going to do anything. Not going to do anything at all. And you can also psychometrize photographs by putting a photo in an envelope and seeing what impressions come through in your mind. And I've read somewhere, and I can't remember where, that photographs and pictures and statues actually attract the astral body of those that they portray. And I can't remember where I've read that. I don't know if you've heard about that. Have you?
That was one of the reasons Roman emperors commissioned statues of them, and even popes, so their actual soul could reside inside a statue.
Right, interesting.
In the world I'm coming from with this, it's of course the stone tape theory, dealing with megaliths and ancient sites, that they contain a sort of an energetic memory within those stones that can be unleashed by the right person. And sure enough, like I have people come and saying, "Oh, I'd love to go and see some megaliths with you here and there," and they would be quite surprised and say, "Oh, I don't like that site." But it's like a megalith. No, I don't like it. I don't like the energy around it. I don't like being there. So this whole thing that like, and it's just like the New Agers with the polished crystal. I've seen people running into these sites that have this dark energy, and they're hugging the stones and talking about how spiritual they feel and everything. And also make me wonder what kind of spirit they actually have. But that's, like the old cathedral stuff can play back images in people's minds. There was a Scottish man called John Foster Forbes, and I'm probably the world's number one expert on him because I discovered him through an obscure news clipping and a book that a friend gave me, and I've collected all his books over the years, and I probably have one of the best collections out there of his work because it was printed in such small numbers. Most of his book writing was done during World War II when paper was expensive and you don't do small book runs. But he was one of the first big promoters of using psychometry in megaliths and ancient sites. And he traveled with a bunch of people that sounds like something out of an old Ealing comedy. One of them was a woman called Miss Eliza Pixley, and she was called the human television set. She could put her hand on a wall in an old castle or something and play back the images she was seeing in her mind. And one of these days, I'm going to write a book or something on Forbes. I did cover him a fair bit in my book Sorcery, but he's a fascinating character. But he was he got results. I mean, he was the one who figured out that the megaliths in Ireland were the same as built by the same people that were in Portugal, and this was discovered later on through genetic, before when genetics was developed and so on. But he was the one that really got me interested in the subject, and I've discovered that like psychometry at one time was taken very seriously in the 1940s and 50s in places like Russia and even parts of America, where research programs are actually done into this concept that of the stone tape thing, of the actual memory implanted into something. On a personal level, yes, don't have anyone that you think is a psychopath make you a cup of tea, because it tastes like battery acid. And I often wonder if that's an unknown line of investigation. I often thought of like writing a detective show where he's interviewing like a potential murderer, and he tells him or her to make it. You want a coffee? Yeah, you make it for me. And then he drinks it, and by tasting it, he knows if he's guilty or innocent. I've had that experience with, and I'm not going to go into details about it, but yes, it tastes like battery acid. And again, like, someone could make you, fried egg and chips, and it could taste better than like eating, a 7-course meal by the best chefs at the Dorchester Hotel in London, or Maxime's in Paris. It's the love that goes into it. It's quite clearly. I always don't want to think, when I see people like, what's his name? That's Gordon Ramsay screaming and effing and shouting around the food. I wouldn't want to put that food inside my belly after that. Carry on in the kitchen. And I've worked in kitchens, dishwashers and stuff when I was a kid. And the kitchens where that have the nicest chefs and most laid back people always got the best reviews and the returning customers. And the one where the head chef was a lunatic and screaming and shouting at everybody, they were the ones that collapsed and folded. I've seen that firsthand. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in psychometry. I think it has enormously wide applications through all kinds of things, from ancient sites to maybe even police work and everything in between. And I want to learn more about it because you have a much better knowledge about it than I do. I only explored it in terms of megaliths and stuff like that and vibes, man, And also don't forget those polished crystals are also a lot of slave labor as well. So the suffering of those people is also in those crystals as well. So yeah, that's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, anybody's a dab hand at psychometry, or has had any experiences or picked up any unusual information from touching an object, let us know in the comments. Be very interested to read them.
And now here's a woman who has been called a bath bomb for the soul. It's Sarah with the Psychic Hygiene Report.
This week's Psychic Hygiene is about being choosy of what you consume. And I don't mean shopping or eating, eat what you want for me. I'm talking about what you bombard your psyche with, such as the news, truther sites and videos showing atrocities, or even scrolling through other people's news feeds and comparing your life to that of a stranger. So this week, consider being a bit more mindful of what you allow into your space, and try coming at the week from a more Fortean angle. And instead of allowing the mundane to take over what you view, try allowing some of the magical and mysterious into the week instead. Read about the mysterious and the unexplained, and study the folklore of your local area and places of interest. There's even news sites out there that focus on good news only, so why not have a week of reading about good things happening to people? So just for the week, give yourself creative license to view the world from a sense of wonder rather than a sense of dread. Put your hand on your heart and feel it beating. It's too precious to waste by being in the shadows of fear that the powers that be want us to be in all the time. I'm not suggesting that negative things should be ignored, but just to bring some balance to the mix. It's okay to read the negative stuff of what's going on in the world, but don't live there and don't let it weigh heavy on your mind. Get in, get out, and get back to your own world and focus on your loved ones. Spring is all about renewal and birth. So allow yourself to look at the world with fresh eyes. We've spent far too long in the shadows and the madness, and it's time to appreciate the natural world again and focus on those things for a while. Not only is it great for your psychic hygiene, but it's also necessary for the stress levels on the physical body. So relax and find a new sense of wonder at the world. And that's my psychic hygiene advice for this week.
Yeah, it's very good. I think the secret too is also learn how to process the information. Yes, you're going to have to deal with like news reports and media that's dark and negative, but it's how you actually process that. It's you can get upset by it and start shouting at the TV. What does that produce? Nothing. It only makes you, it bonds you to it and bonds you to the trauma of it. The best thing is to go, yeah, that's it, and that's the end of it. Move on. Another one I'd say that would tie in with that is misery guts. Stay away from people who are misery guts. They will just, they will, misery loves company, and it seeks it out, and they will eat your soul alive. Give them half a chance if you give them an ear, or let them into your life. And next thing you know, they'll. Anyway, a lot of these people claim to be like, oh, I'm so sad, I'm so happy, and you lend them a sympathetic ear, you find that very quickly they're vampires, and they're trauma vampires. And after a while, you'll find out that like they'll have eaten you alive and wrecked your life before you realized it. So it's not just things and situations. I think that also applies to people. Our third and final topic tonight is a subject that I've always found fascinating, and I've experimented with quite a bit. And that's electronic voice phenomenon, otherwise known as EVP for short. This is probably the first Fortean investigation I ever did as a kid. I had a cassette recorder, a small portable cassette recorder with a built-in microphone, and I managed to get a 120-minute tape, which you get, so 60 minutes on each side. I was about 11, and I put the tape in and put it on the floor in my room, and it wasn't picking up sounds from outside because we were lifted up on a tower block, so I couldn't pick it from the streets or anything. And I left it running. I woke up during the night to go to the toilet. A few hours later, saw that the cassette had run through, flipped it over, hit record again, went back to bed. To my absolute amazement, I picked up real audible human voices on the tape. Now, they weren't having conversations, they weren't talking to me, but occasionally you'd hear someone say something like, it reminds me of, the Pink Floyd album, Dark Side of the Moon, where you have those voices at the beginning. I know I'm mad, I've always been mad, that kind of thing. It's like that. You see, like, you hear a conversation, you hear a sentence come in saying, it's the wrong color. Or, be quiet. This kind of thing. Words. Very clear, not even vague. And at first you think your mind is playing tricks on itself. So you think to yourself, okay, what's this really? Am I picking up ghosts? Is it a radio broadcast of a TV radio show that's bled over into the tape somehow? And you go through all the stuff. Now that also shows how EVP falls into different methods. There's the cassette player under the during the night running under your bed or whatever. There's also the radio broadcasts that come in. It's not an unusual phenomena of radio signals from the past coming back and being heard by airports. Like there's an airport in England where they used to hear World War II pilots radioing back. Now they couldn't have a conversation with them. Now there's all kinds of reasons for that. Sound can bounce off objects in space and come back, this kind of thing. So that's not completely in the world of spookiness. But still, there's been some very strange experiences in that regard. There's also televisions. In fact, in recent times, I've been encouraging people to actually, if they have an old analog TV, plug it in and just don't tune to a channel. Let's try and record the audio somehow, because there's less analog signals out there now. So this is a great time now to pick up anything on the UHF or VHF bandwidth, because it's all digital now nearly. In Ireland anyway, it's 100% digital. There's no terrestrial, really anything left other than radio stations. So that's another one you can do. You could also do what I did a few years ago on VON, and I put a digital audio recorder inside a jar with a sigil on the bottom and placed it in a notorious famous haunted house of ill repute around here, and picked up, you can listen to yourself. There's spiritual wildlife, demons, whatever you want to call it, that's having a conversation on that thing at different speed. Now, that's almost certainly could be a fairy thing, and there is fairy, what you call it, phenomena in that house, in that particular part of Sligo. There's a fairy ring nearby, and it also, the speed that the thing is talking at suggests also that this concept of the fairy world works at a much faster speed. That when we were to see them moving, they're moving at much faster speed. They're in a different time frame than we are, and the voices sound the same. So I've had tremendous success with EVP, and I think anyone can as well. Now, what is EVP? What are we picking up? I really don't know. It could be lots of things. It could be a voice from the past. It could be like a psychometric type thing where the thing plays back. It could be literally an entity. It could be ghosts. It could be fairies. It could be nothing. But it's one of the most rewarding things to do. Now, I found that you have better luck with analog tape than, I still have an old boombox that I use, that you have analog tape, you still get better results than digitals. The spiritual world is not particularly fond of digital, although it does work. That's why I'm very skeptical of things like ghost boxes and stuff like that, and these other digital systems used to record ghosts' voice and so on. I think it's better off sticking with analog because it's in that range of natural frequencies. Now, like if you think of the human hearing, it's what, 90 hertz, depending on what age you are, you lose it as you get up to a 20,000 hertz. So that's like from the low B on a bass guitar, which would be like 30 or 40 hertz, all the way up to a high-pitched squeal that vanishes. And the dogs hear beyond that. But it's more than that. These are, how come we don't hear these things while we're conscious, but the tape picks them up? Well, there's the mystery. There's the mystery. Is this the voice emanating in a form that's electromagnetic? Demons make the sound that sounds like a static radio, a clicking and popping sound. It sounds like electronic arcing or welding, actually, when the sounds a demon makes. So is it something like that? But electronic voice phenomena is one of the best and most rewarding, once it doesn't traumatize you or terrifies you, paranormal 40 and hands-on investigations we can do. And yeah, that's it. I mean, it gets thumbs up from me. It works, and that's basically it.
Those sounds are probably always around us, but we can't hear it unless we record it, and it just seems to only be picked up by electrical recordings. So it could be picking up from another world or dimension in the same space that we're in, and perhaps it comes through in our own language because as the sound transcends through that from that frequency to this one, maybe our senses hear it as our mother tongue. I don't know, maybe it's something to do with...
I know what you mean, like the actual sound wave, like the Dr. Emoto things where he spoke words into water and froze it, and it showed like that certain words had this distorted sound shape in the frozen water, where words that were said had it like love and stuff had harmonious shapes to them. Maybe, but that's almost like a fingerprint that translates across different. Actually, there's a lot of Vedic concepts about that's actually what does happen. Yeah, that could be true. I'd be more inclined to think that we're getting something from the future, the past, or in this dimension we're in an adjacent dimension that we're also in as well, but we don't detect it. This kind of thing. I think like now with this wave function collapse happening now, would probably be a great time to actually hit the EVPs.
Having said that about the translation, though, there have actually been people reporting they've heard foreign voices, languages, or even old ancient languages that don't exist anymore, and unrecognizable languages. And
that's how the thing came off. Somebody was filming word songs. I think it was in France. On the background of the tape was someone speaking in Frisian that wasn't there with him, talking about all the different species of birds, and whatever language it was, and describing their nesting habits. And it was all over the tape, as clear as anything. Yet there was no one around the guy. So there you go. That's an amazing one. That's how it was actually discovered. Of course, I had my very famous one with the Jimmy Savile thing, when that wasn't even deliberately done as an EVP. It was when I did a VON on Jimmy Savile, the 666 serial killer, and I recounted the story that night. And all over it, it starts about halfway through. There's absolute words being said on the thing, and towards the end, I reveal, kind of in a dramatic way, and that person was Jimmy Savile, and his voice goes in the background, and that thing is terrifying.
Yeah, I've heard.
The next day, when I finished that broadcast, I had to get the phone jack placed in the wall repaired because it burnt out. So I definitely summoned some kind of entity into that show, and it's there for everyone to listen to. It's just mind blowing, and I didn't hear it as it was going on. So maybe I'm just someone who's very inclined to be able to get that stuff on tape. Like some people are better at like mediumship or better at other things. Maybe that's my mediumship. Because also as a kid, I wrote about in Sorcery about the time I brought the radio station in from Providence, Rhode Island, while I was reading Lovecraft under the bed. I mean, it happened, so maybe I have something in my nervous system that allows me to access this stuff easier. But yeah, I mean, I would totally encourage people to do it. Totally.
We've had Jimmy Savile come through on your videos on a number of occasions. I'm sure I've heard it several times.
Yeah, but that one show was like remarkable in that it was like an otherworldly, non-human, spectral voice all over the thing. Yeah, a lot of my broadcasts do have weird sounds that appear. People often say, "Did you hear that?" Like a voice says this, that, and the other. Yeah, that happens a lot. That happens a lot.
I'll put a link to the video of that in the description because I remember which one it is. It's the one with the black background, isn't it? And you've got the white writing on it.
Yeah, that's the one.
I'll put it in.
It's on the Thomas Sheridan channel. That's one of my highest rated videos.
Yeah, I remember watching that. Thomas Edison tried to invent a machine capable of communication with the dead as well, but he never succeeded. But he did believe it was possible that you could capture disembedded voices with a.
Oh yeah, well, actually, much of the development of the early years of radio was driven by this desire to contact spirits. In fact, I've spoke about this a few times, Sarah, over the years. About the year 2002, I was in my parents' house late one night, and they were out, and I switched on the BBC, and there was about 11 o'clock at night on either BBC, I think it was BBC Two, one of the most spectacular documentaries I'd ever seen in my life. It was about the early development of radio. I'm talking about people like Marconi and Edison, and how so much of it was driven by the desire to contact spirits. And that's how they literally, even the vacuum tubes and stuff were designed for that reason. There was so much occult, and they showed the Krokstrube, which was the first TV cathode ray tube, and the first image they ever broadcast was a Maltese cross, which is an occultic symbol. But they also had this phone where a guy could talk to his dead partner. The guy died, and he was able to contact him through this machine. And the guy on the other side was an arrogant asshole, just like he was in real life. And he was saying, no, you set the frequency wrong. You stupid. Do it this way. Try it again. And this stuff. That documentary, when it was over, my jaw hit the floor. I said, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. I have not, or anyone I know has not been able to find it since. I think because it pissed off someone from the gorgeous Brian Cox end of the spectrum, that it was it would have people believing there's ghosts and disembodied spirits if you let that thing be broadcast again, or someone from that inclined that way, the materialistic kind of way. said, pull that program and don't never show it again. It's not in the archives, and no one has ever been able to find it. If you could find it, I would scatter rose petals at the feet of the person who could find that program. But it was sensational. It was sensational, and it literally basically showed that there's life after death, conscious life after death, and it's never been seen since. You know, you often wonder it's like a Masonic trick or something that they played on us or something, you know. But yeah, it was like it. Yeah, I mean, the radio thing was driven by it, but there's like so much stuff around it is remarkable. You know, people who work in radio stations will tell you they're seeing incredible things and heard incredible things come true that shouldn't have come true. People working in military broad, you know, bandwidth and stuff like that, having conversations with people that don't exist and this kind of thing. And then there's that spooky channel in America. It's a UHF channel that they keep always, you know, they don't tell you what's on it. And people listen to that, and it's a forbidden channel. And people that tune into that and hear EVPs and stuff like that. So yeah, it's, you know, I've often found the kind of things of broadcast occultism riveting. You know, I can't get enough.
Have you heard about people who've received telephone calls from the departed, the deceased, and they come through as a mechanical? It comes through as a mechanical voice.
Yep. Be careful about that one. That could be a demon.
Yeah, but it's a similar. It's a form of EVP, isn't it?
Well, and also the Men in Black. That's usually most of their phone calls.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's mostly usually, and it's mechanical voice again. You have to be careful with that stuff. Saying, assuming, oh, there's loads of stuff. I mean, it just never ends. It never ends. Like, and you know, I often thought like one of the missed opportunities in the movie The Shining was that radio they had to contact the park rangers.
Yeah.
That had something had a show sounded on that. It would have been amazing. That would have been a nice little tasty thing to put into that movie. Yeah, it's just you know, analog electronics is really, but even digital can do it. You know, the Jimmy Savile thing is an interesting one. I'll tell you this one. I recorded that when that program was broadcast live on a Sunday night on Type 1 radio. It was a live show. And I used to use an analog mic mixer that had a vacuum tube. I still have it. So I wanted to get a more warmer sound from a guitar. I had a guitar and I had a microphone input on it. And a little tube, little glass tube that would glow inside it. And I got a lovely warm sound, 1950s kind of like, you know, guitar sound. And I used to use that on the show as well for the audio, for the microphone. And that was plugged in when I got the Jimmy Savile thing. So it was the vacuum tube in that preamp that did that one, that made that thing happen. So that was like, you know, there you go. Yeah, it was a digital end product. But, you know, the microphone and the preamp were very, very old school analog. But I've even picked up things on my guitar. That's another one. I've actually, when I was playing music, you know, if you hold up an electric guitar and you shout into the pickups, you can actually hear a voice coming out of a speaker. But sometimes I'll be sitting there and I thinking about things like that, and suddenly you hear a sound coming out of the amp that's being picked up by the pickup, a voice or something. And that's another one. And also, I'm sure recording engineers and studio engineers pick up. I mean, when Black Sabbath recorded Bloody Sabbath, the place was swirling and ghosts, but there was apparently huge numbers of edits on the master tape because of all these like EVPs they're picking up.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? We're analog, as we know, and analog devices pick up these things, and it seems to be the way, like a bridge between the realms. If that's why the powers that be want everything digital and want everything analog switched off and forgotten about.
Oh, that's why I use the term the digital gin. That's why I've been warning people for the best part of a decade about this stuff. There's nowhere in this universe a digital signal exists except on this earth. And that should be something quite profound. The entire universe and the natural world is analog. And like I remember I got to an event once and there's this new age dingbat. I'm sorry, I'm picking on new age dingbats. And she goes, "We're biological DNA computers." And it's like, no, we're not. We're digital machines. Said, no, we're not. That's not bullshit. We're analog, you know, in every way. And yeah, I think that's why. I mean, the natural. I think, you know, there's a famous statement that electricity destroyed the fairies in Ireland. that the electricity is what chased them away into the mines and things like that. There's a lot of truth to that, but I think it's almost like you look at someone like Bill Gates, you can tell. I described him as the anti-Tom Bombadil, from the Tolkien trilogy, that he exists to destroy everything good in nature, and a huge part of it is his digital mindset, whether it's being, needlecraft or software. You can tell that some demonic force is behind him to destroy as much of the human connection to nature as possible. And you have to ask, what is that force?
Is it a portal to bring these demons in? It's been done so gradually. Do you remember back in 1982, 81, when we had the first digital watches?
Yeah.
And we just thought they were so cool and, nothing to see
The
here.
little red lettering on them, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's gradually kind of gone from there to where we are now. And it's just very, very odd. And now we've got AI writing everything for us and creating artwork and the computer, the internet. I mean, what's in the internet that we can't see?
Yeah, no, well, me, I've been talking about this for 10 years now, more in public. And yeah, I mean, I think we've only ever scratched the surface. But yeah, I mean, there's the digital realm is the demonic realm. I've no doubt about it. Is a type of demonic realm, and it has a vested interest in killing the analog. It's almost like you want to talk about a battle in heaven. That's it. It's between the digital forces and the analog forces. And this whole thing of the Internet of Things, where you have a chip in your clothes and stuff that switches on a heater when you're cold, and this kind of thing. They just want us enveloped. They want it's obvious they want the chip inside us, but that's it. This is. I mean, even the way the latest medications and the latest needlecrafts work, they're very much written in codes and software.
I've got just a few examples here of some skeptics that were picking up some EVP recordings by accident, not purposely. I think one of them was one that you mentioned about the bird song. The first one is in Italy, and it's a Father Giannetti and a Father Gemelli. They picked up an EVP while recording Gregorian chants on a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and the wire on the machine kept breaking, and Father Gemelli looked upwards and asked his dead father for help, and his father's voice was heard later on the recording saying, "Of course I will help you. I'm always with you." And they had these tapes investigated, and some experiments actually confirmed the phenomenon of that.
I'll give you one. I'll just interrupt you there. After written Puzzling People, I'd been contacted by a detective in London who actually worked in Charing Cross of all places, and he had interviewed serial killers and child sex killers, and he said to me, "Yeah, they're demons." He actually said that they're demons, and these criminal psychopaths. And he said, whenever they would go, they have a special tape recorder that they use in police interrogations. It's made in such a way that it can't be opened. So, like, if a copper wanted to frame a criminal, he couldn't open the tape and splice it and change it around and put in a new one. There's a lock on it, and it goes straight to like whoever has the permission to open it. And he said when they'd ever use this machine with some of those like child sex killers or something, the tape wouldn't work. The power would fail, and sometimes be other voices on top of it when he'd be talking, like a different voice in the background. But he said they never had a smooth recording. There was always problems with it, and only with those personality types.
That's because they got something attached to them or inside them.
Yeah.
That's horrible. This is the birdsong one here. Frederick Jurgensen was recording songbirds. On the playback, he could hear his mother's voice saying in German, "Frederick, you are being watched. Friedel, my little Friedel, Can you hear me? And further recordings of hundreds of such voices earned him the title of the father of EVP, and he wrote 2 books on the subject. One's called Voices from the Universe, and the second one is called Radio Contacts from the Dead.
Yeah. He also had a very good high quality recording machine that was a small. That's actually what helped as well. The quality of the machines when they got better. And this one was the ones they used to use for radio broadcast back then was a little reel to reel machine that was portable that had little reels about this size. And you know, you can take this like kinds of lots of ways. There's a channel I watch on YouTube called Techmoan, and he repairs and fixes and talks about old electronic devices, old radios, boom boxes, record players. And one of them was a station announcement, a special machine that British Rail used to have, where if there was a station announcement, they put a tape in there, and every so often it would play. There will be delays on Tuesday to the line to Watford because of engineering works, right? That kind of thing. And he got his hands on one of these machines from 1987, and the original tape with the voice was still in there. And I was just thinking, isn't that a kind of time travel? You know, when he started playing, the line between Sheridan and blah, blah, blah will be closed the weekend for engineering works. And that was from 1980. I just made me think, isn't that a kind of time travel? You know, like it hadn't been heard since then. And the person that made that recording might not be over. See, there's a lot more to the occult of radio and electronics than people realize. It even looked like the electronic circuitry, a schematic of the inside of an electronic circuit for a tape recorder, an analog one now. It looks like all sigils. It looks like sigils. You know, there's, you know, when you design a piece of electronic equipment, you literally start with sigils, and it's the schematic. You know, the different symbols for resistors, transistors, capacitors, potentiometers, and it literally is like a form of magic. And you design these sigils, and then you make a radio or a tape recorder out of it. That's literally how it used to be done. You know, so it was a kind of it's been a very underappreciated form of the occult. And I used to work with a guy. Sorry, because I studied electronics for a few years, but I dropped out. And I worked with a guy. I got a part-time job in the summer fixing televisions and radios and that kind of thing. I could fix guitar amps, and that's what they brought me in for. And I was, you know, I'd be fixing guitar amps. But there was a guy there, honest to God, he had magical powers. There'd be a TV, that was 3 of us working there. The TV would be brought in, and we could not get the bloody thing working, right? He would walk over, switch it on, and it would work. He would open the back of something, whittle around, not even change anything, and it would work again. So he had a power inside him to restore the electronic system inside him. So he was sort of like a wizard himself, we used to call him the electronic wizard. He could fix anything, and often by just doing nothing. That Uri Geller thing, you know, like that Uri Geller was able to make a broken radios and TVs work again and things like that, and broken clocks. Well, this guy definitely, this guy had that gift. So, you know, it shows like how deep our relationship with the analog is.
I remember a video you did. It was when you was doing these little 10-minute talks on the occult, and you stood in front of your bookcase a few years ago now. And I remember one, you talked about something you did with a transistor radio. You put a sigil or something in it. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you played this transistor radio in a coffee shop or something because somebody who was working there was being bullied by the manager.
Oh, I was a bad boy. Well, I wasn't. Yeah, someone very close to me had been bullied by the person that owned that coffee shop.
Yes.
And so at a point where they were in a desperate state. So, you know, that's the rules of magic engagement was fine. But then I heard they said something shitty about me. So I said, well, okay, I'm going to destroy your business. And she was the only bitch working in there. So it wasn't like other people lost their jobs, nice people. In fact, so what I did was on the water pipe going into the building, I glued on it a talisman that making all the water taste foul. So any tea or coffee they would make from it. And I also put a cassette recorder underneath the table. An FM transmitter with a small receiver with a small speaker. and then a transmitter outside saying, the batteries ran down. All the food in here is toxic. It's poisonous. It will make you sick. All the food in here is toxic. It's poisonous. It will make you sick. Went out of business within a few weeks.
Right. Is that a similar sort of thing, using electronics?
Yeah, well, that's what I was talking about, like circuit mancy, or we want to call it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Circuit mancy. Yeah, you could coin that phrase.
Yeah, but I was like always, well, ever since I had that experience as a kid with the Rhode Island radio station, I knew there was something magic about radios anyway. And like, yeah, I mean, I did. That was like, well, that's one of the few things operations I've ever done that publicly spoken about, but only because the person was truly evil and deserved it. And then when that was all over, I knew the next girl, and she was actually a girl from Manchester who took the business over. And I took out everything. I scraped off everything. I cleaned out everything, and I told her to repaint the walls. And I told her what I did because this was one that screwed her in business before, and she's still in business to this day there. So you shouldn't really use magic to get that back at people, but this was a noble cause. But yeah, and that's just scratch the surface. You can make menus and stuff. You can do things. What you do is you become almost like a facsimile of the thing itself, but in the way you want to hurt it. You become a mimic. It's almost like you put yourself, like that whole thing where you put yourself into the clothes of someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It's that. So you create a magical business that's running in tandem with this real one. And the magical business that runs in tandem with the one you wreck it. And it's quantum coupled to the other one. I'm very bad, but hey, it was when someone you love has been tortured, you do anything to protect them.
Did you have to do anything to prevent it coming back on you?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Is that because you're righteous?
Well, I would have until I found that she was talking shit about me. And then the rules of engagement were quite clear. Then we are at war, and I don't have to worry about any blowback.
Became personal. Then
she was a female psychopath, pure evil, pure evil, and just deteriorated after that, but deserved it. Like no one had any. You asked anybody about this person, and everyone said what an evil bitch she was. The kind of thing. She was like a monster. So I wasn't picking on a nice person or anything like that. As I said, she employed nobody, so no innocent person lost their job. And all the suppliers and everything, they all kept their supplies because another girl took the business over. So they didn't lose any business. It was just her. It was just her. And I'll tell you another one. Oh my God, when I think about it, she lives in terror of me to this day. I haven't seen her in about 2 years, but she's the last time she saw me was walking around the supermarket during the scandemic without a mask, and she ran away like I was a monster demon or myself or something. Everyone in the shop was looking at me having no mask, but she looked at me in such a way. The day that she signed the lease, you can put this all up there. The shop, when the stores are being put over to new owners, right? And they often cover them in white paint or taped on newspaper sheets until the inside of the store is all painted up and cleaned. They hide the inside, when they're renovating it. You can't see in because it's usually newspapers. Well, it was newspapers this time. And I saw the place. The other person involved said they had a vision that this monster was going to take over that restaurant, that cafe, in the shower one morning. And I said, really? Just, yeah, I did. That's holy shit. And then later on, out of pure curiosity, I peered in between a gap in the newspapers about that Wyatt, right? And she was signing the lease on the table, and her eye caught my eye. And she literally went like this. But didn't know why, because nothing happened yet, kind of a thing. But it was like, magic is real. It's as simple as that. And the gods do work with you if it's a righteous cause. But this was a war against pure evil, so I have no qualms about it. But The fact that I looked in that slot in the papers at the moment she was signing the lease on the table was the gods telling me, you're under starter's orders, go. And I went.
That's the tricky thing, isn't it? Making sure it's a righteous crusade and it's not just.
Yeah, she had no kids either, so that was
Yeah.
another one. And she
Yeah.
had no husband.
Yeah,
So there was no, and no pets either. So, oh yeah, absolutely. You have to be the most compassionate person in the world, because that's why, you have all these crazy borderline women who ex their ex-husbands, but they've often had kids with that man. And then they wonder why their kid is killed in a car accident or something like that.
yeah.
Magic is not this bullshit you see like on these groups on Facebook where they're talking about, posting pictures of like Stevie Nicks. Very serious business, And unfortunately, like, I often think that's why a lot of the emigration around certain countries, like so many people left Sicily and so many people left Ireland. If you look into the history of those countries, and even Germany in the past, everyone was hexing everyone else in these villages. And the only way to survive is to emigrate. So that's the warning of magic. It's like, that's why I know that Crowley and Gardner invented Wicca, to keep the idiots out of Thelema, to give them bullshit that didn't work.
Like a form of gatekeeping.
Yeah, distraction. Well, we got more in that segment than we bargained for, but anyway, electronic voice phenomena. Good stuff.
And things you can do with a transistor radio.
An FM broadcaster. Yeah.
So last week we were stuck in the middle of a Renfield supercell. So now I'm going to hand you over to our meticulous weatherman to see if we've got good vibrations on the way or whether we're still sailing through heavy psychic storms. Thomas.
Well, the psychic weather this week is we're still dealing with the Renfield, not to the extreme that we did last week. Anyone has noticed, you're probably seeing it on the roads, especially there's very erratic driving and behavior. And there's a lot of that kind of thing going along. It's tapering off. Because the energy systems needed to sustain something like that, even with the most active Renfields, it wears them out after a while. And it's also telling us of things deeper in the zeitgeist, because often like when you have mass Renfielding, there's usually kind of like a problem in the world, like an economic one or military or something like that. So that's one of the reasons we study the psychic weather, to see how the world is around us and the office or the place where we work. Yeah, it's still going on. It's still there, but it'll probably be gone by the end of the month completely. But it's a slow burn one. It's not one of these furious ones that happens over a few days of absolute mayhem and then it's gone. This one seems to be dragging out a bit. So, same rules, buckle down, don't get into arguments, especially with strangers. Keep your head down, mind your own business, don't get drawn into fights and arguments. And there's a lot to be said for keeping your mouth shut during these times. So that will be the psychic defense this week in the psychic weather. Just keep your mouth shut and don't get involved, because the Renfield ears are dangerous ears. And that's me, Thomas Sheridan, with the psychic weather report. And now we come to the part of the show where Sarah and I take a book from our Fortean library that really inspired us and really, helped us in our journey into this world, and recommend it to you and suggest maybe you want to pick it up and get it. My book this week is A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, the Mathematical Archetypes of Nature, Art, and Science, a voyage from 1 to 10 by Michael S. Schneider. This book is a must-have if you're interested in anything to do with geometry, design, natural forms. He goes through all the numbers 1 to 10, and in them shows that they have their significance within the natural world. It's full of illustrations within architecture, within biological functioning, cell reproduction, the Egyptian temples, even like the placement of sacred sites in Ireland. It's very well written in a very engaging and likable way. It comes across a very nice personality from the book. And if you're interested in all dimensions, it's the golden section times a million. If you're interested in all that stuff, loads of interesting stuff in here regarding shapes and how these geometric shapes come about. Were used in classical design in the Middle Ages and so on. So that's A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, long title, and The Mathematical Archetypes of Nature, Art and Science, a voice from 1 to 10 by Michael S. Schneider. Can't recommend it enough. It's absolutely a great fun book to read. And there's loads of things you like. It has, like Magic Squares, Crimea. It covers so many different cultures in here. So things like even DNA. He shows the symbolism of mathematical symbolism in Buddhism and things like that, in drawing, architecture, how paintings are constructed, how design is constructed, but it's all through numbers. And each chapter is a number 1, and then chapter 2 is chapter 3, and it's all to do with numbers and so on. So yeah, can't recommend that one enough. It's a very enjoyable book.
That would make a good book for an artist then, wouldn't it?
Or an architect, or someone interested in sacred geometry, or or just anyone who's very interested in how forms are constructed. And great for graphic designers. So if you're a budding graphic designer, you learn about which shapes the human eye are drawn to, and nearly all of them have an esoteric origin. So there, what does that tell you?
Well, my book this week is called The Secret Law of Cats by Fred Gettings. And it's a cat lover's book, but with a difference, because it comes from a folklore, Fortean, enchanting, and occult guide to the mysteries of the cat. Oh, if only more writers wrote books in this manner. It's illustrated with beautiful paintings and prints. I'm just going to open it carefully because I don't want to break the spine, because it's quite an old book. You can see there.
Color illustrations too.
Color illustrations, yeah.
It looks like high quality paper.
Yes. And also there's pencil drawings and photographs as well, and ancient drawings and antiques and all sorts, and talks about the occult symbolism of cats and cats in nursery rhymes, old wives' tales and fairy tales, and how cats are associated with the Virgin Mary, cats for divination and predictions, and the psychic ties between man and his cat. And it goes through all the black cat myths, how cats were viewed as demonic, and the mystical significance of the 9 lives. And in Egypt, cats were worshipped as gods, but in the 16th century England, they were demoted to demons. And it was the Christian church who sought to ignore the cat in its natural reaction against the pagan religions that worship the cat. So it became perceived as demonic, or even as the devil himself. In terms of occult lore, all pets are supposed to reflect the inner nature of their owners, and the cat is no exception. The notion of the cat as a psychic has become a part of popular symbolism in cat literature, where man and his cat wear each other's stuff. So, for example, with Puss in Boots, in the story, it's actually the cat's intelligence that leads his master on to better things. And the fact that the puss wears human clothes in the story points to the symbolism that the cat is actually a psychic extension of his master. And it goes into it goes through nursery rhymes and fairy tales and explains them to you in what they really mean, what the allegories are, what they mean, what's behind the stories. And it's just packed full of information like this. And it's quite an old book. I think it's from the 80s. 1989, yeah. and smells old. And the pages are yellowing now, but it's a treasure of mine. I'm quite proud of it. It's a nice one to have on the bookshelf. So that's my book review this week. A wonderful book about the magic of cats in myth, legend, and occult history.
And that sounds to be right up my street too as well. Yeah, I never even heard of it. Sounds great. And now we introduce a new segment to the show. Yes, we're always expanding and developing Hocus Focus. This week we have a kind of a soapbox, Big Brother room shout out thing, points of view like they used to have on the old TV stations, letters to the editor in video form, where we have people telling us about experiences they had that may have been relevant to the topics we're talking about, or subject matters pertaining to 40 and the 40 on type things you see here on Hocus Focus. This week, and for the first episode, we are honoured to have one of the stately homos of Ireland, the legendary Christian Morris himself, who's going to tell us about his own astral travelling experiences.
All my sentient life, I've had the ability to travel in my dreams, to gain insights from far beyond my own temporal place. Different people describe different ways of astral travelling, visions, meditation, out-of-body experience, and in my case, I like to call it dream wandering. The very basic concept of astral travel is inconceivable to the modern NPC and normie. I've regularly chatted with people in dreams, only to continue the conversation the following day in real life. My first experience of this was when I was 6. I'll always remember a dream I had in late 2016. Suddenly, I found myself in what looked like a fairly quaint and old-fashioned schoolroom. Not antiquated, but like something from the 1950s or 1960s. There was a woman teacher in front of a class of school children, all of whom were blonde and white. I couldn't decipher the faces, but the whole experience was still extremely vivid. Many of the girls had pigtails like in Little House on the Prairie, and indeed the whole thing gave me that vibe. Modern mainstream media, with its continuous sensory assault and overload, is the absolute opposite of what might encourage proper astral travel. The question is whether or not that's deliberate. The teacher told the kids that I was Mr. Morris and that I'd travelled back in time from Ireland of 2016 to where they were, being a school for children aged about 8 or 9, in Ohio, in the United States, in 1972. The teacher explained that while I was asleep and dreaming, so were they. She repeated that everyone in the room was asleep at the same time, she and the kids in 1972, and myself in 2016. What's stayed so strongly in my mind is the credibility of the teacher, how everything she said made perfect sense, and how, within the dream, I felt nothing unusual or strange. In early December of 2021, many millions of people across the world said that they had had what was in effect an astral vision of Queen Elizabeth, informing them or in some way letting them sense that she had died or was dying or was about to die. That is entirely consistent with the genuine nature of astral travel. The teacher asked me, "Sir, is there one thing you want to tell us all about 2016? Yes, I said. It'll be a time of communication very far beyond what you have here in 1972. You can't even begin to think of what communications will be like in 2016. Everyone will be able to communicate and be communicated with devices which they'll carry around in their pockets." Since the Enlightenment, and even more so since the Industrial Revolution, the impetus has been to push the masses away from considering anything transcendental and to living in the here and now. That's just an economic imperative. I wanted to tell them about 9/11 and Trump being elected, and I said, something else, but the teacher cut me short and said, no, that's enough for now. You're going back to your time, and you're going to wake up now. Goodbye. She snapped her fingers, and I woke up in Ireland in 2016. If the teacher and the kids were genuinely asleep in Ohio in 1972, then I believe that could have been a real out-of-body experience. An example of astral travel, or what I call dream wandering. So that's all from myself, Christian Morris, and my special report for Hocus Focus.
Well, thank you again for joining us. Please keep your comments coming in and your suggestions, and please keep sharing us far and wide, because you're our only form of advertising, and we really do appreciate every share, as it helps to bring in new viewers and it helps us to grow the show into something even more amazing. Next week, we're back over on Beyond Room 313, so make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss an episode.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining in and keeping part of the conversation and amazing comments and input. If you have any video you want to send us, even for that could be something that could be used as a 40 news flash or a location report. Don't make it any more than 5 minutes though if it's a location report. We'd be delighted to have it. And so we'll see you next week on my channel, and we'll just finish up now with the tarot card.
This week's tarot of the week is the 8 of Wands. And the 8 of Wands signifies movement and action. And the wands are flying through a clear sky with no obstacles. And each wand has growth on them, showing opportunities. And if you get working on them now, then they're going to come to some kind of fruition. And you have to throw your wands and take your shot with determination and strength, while focusing on what needs to be done. So take the inner strength given from last week to propel forward now towards a creative endeavour. You may have recently found yourself struggling with an idea or a decision, been a bit worried to go forward. Well, this card signifies those obstacles have been removed now, and it's plain sailing for the realisation of a goal, or maybe even a travel opportunity. If you've got a project you want to work on or something that you'd like to manifest, now is the time to get rid of any distractions and naysayers and start to become laser focused on what needs to be done. Like the magician in the tarot, you can reach up and bring down any one of those opportunities into the physical. They're right above your head at this time. It's a good moment to cut down on things that make you procrastinate, things like excessive social media scrolling, or I'll just watch one more episode before I start what I need to do, that sort of thing. Let go of things that are holding you back. This is the time for action, and opportunities won't knock twice. The wands in the card will eventually land, and their movement will come to a standstill. Whatever you turn your hand to at the moment will take off at a great speed and momentum. You should be feeling positive and energetic, thinking on your feet and seeing good results and finding solutions to problems or previous setbacks. One thing to be aware of during the next week is infatuation or getting carried away. Keep one foot on the ground and one foot in the flow. It's all about movement, so lean into it and don't become too rigid in your approach to it. Enjoy the process and don't get infatuated by a certain outcome. Just like the wands on the card, things will fall into place by themselves. The 8 of Wands are the fire element, and the zodiac signs that are associated with the card are Aries, Leo and Sagittarius. So look out for that sign being relevant to any opportunities around you.
The card often represents the card being the card of communication. The arrows going through the air, the wands going through the air represent the transmission of a message. And because they're pointing downwards, they're reaching their destination. So they represent message received. So it's a very powerful communicative As Sarah said, if you want to get an idea or project out, a very powerful communicative card. Message sent, message received.
Actually, message sent, message received is basically analog, isn't it?
There you go.
So,
Good night, everybody.
good night.